Thankfully, it's a good modifier. Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? All right, good. Who's sober? Need to work on that.
Yes, we
do. It's Saturday. You should be starting early. Oh my God, there's a Ganondorf in the audience. A hiding, very shy Ganondorf. That is awesome. Oh, they will be able. Hello, all of you. If you raise your hand if you have no idea who I am. Awesome, great. My name is Matt Mercer. I'm an American actor and voice actor. I'm also, what this panel is about, I'm a huge fucking geek. I've been my whole life. It all began back in the day when I remember watching Thundercats and He-Man, Masters of the Universe. And then split it off into wondrous realm of the Nintendo Entertainment System, where I regaled myself with exuberant tales of Link and Mario, and then went into Nintendo Entertainment System cereal, which was terrible. From there, it's been many various geek things I've done throughout my life and achievements I've made. I spent most of my middle school years, in grades 6 through 8, going right after school on Friday to a local Blockbuster Video, renting a Super Nintendo RPG, beating it by Sunday night, returning it, and going back to school on Monday. That was a large portion of my young adult life. It was just destroying role-playing game after role-playing game, like the entire Lufia series, the entire Mana series, all the Final Fantasies, all the Breath of Fires, even back in the day, Star Tropics, which is more of an action RPG, but yeah, that was a fun one. But yeah, anyway, huge geek. And it's been one of those things where I began in the fandom and then somehow transitioned into professional, but made sure I never let go of the fandom because that was my life, that's who I am. Why should I ever be ashamed of that necessarily? And in doing so, it's not only allowed me to have a lot more context for a lot of the projects I work on, but I've also converted a number of other professionals who are not geeks into my realm. Made them one of us. And that's been a lot of fun. So, I mean, as far as the geek spectrum goes, I'm not a geek in every regard, and that's one kind of misnomer I think a lot of geek culture seems to have is, if you don't understand about this one geek subculture, you're not a real geek. And it's like, no, you don't have time for all that. Everyone has, for the most part, one major fandom or one major geek aspect they're into, and a couple of other tertiary ones, or maybe a few big ones that they focus on. But you can't be into every single thing, But there's a lot of geek-on-geek hatred and violence in some places of the world. By that I mean the internet.
That's not in the world.
And let me just start and preface this with seriously, guys, tone down the hate. If there is anybody, and I'm not saying any of you have, but be keen to step up and defend a friend if they're being, flame warred somewhere on a Tumblr page because they posted that they weren't a huge fan of this episode. Like, well, you're obviously not that, blah, blah. And honestly, this is a big theme I've talked about for many times. Girl geeks. I don't think there even should be the term girl gamer or girl geek. You're just a geek. You're a gamer, and that difference is absolutely unnecessary. And there's this large thing of like women having to prove themselves as geeks that is so ridiculous to me. Because really, more than anything, it's not that there's all of a sudden a new resurgence of women who are into geek culture. They've always been there. It's just only recently has it been okay for them to talk about it without them being looked at weird or being torn down or condemned because of it. But yet there's still an aspect of it within the own community. And I understand a lot of it is too the intimidation of having a culture that is so based on having something special and private to you that the rest of the world doesn't understand, and that's a large portion of what a lot of geek culture comes from, is being, well, there were the, all the sports ballers out there in high school who went out and did their games with the running and were inside playing Dungeons and Dragons, but then all of a sudden if someone who converts from that realm goes like, oh no, I also like geek stuff, we feel offended, we feel like we have to defend our territory, and I think, no, it needs to be an all-inclusive thing. And it's wonderful to see that we're becoming more and more tolerant and more open to that idea. Really what it comes down to is people who for a long time didn't even want to see what geek culture was about because it had that strange stigma to it of like, the whole smelly neck beard circumstance, or the kids that would awkwardly sit in their corner and obsess. There's been a really negative stigma to it, and I think that's starting to fade now. And I think a lot of people are starting to look into aspects of geek culture and understand, oh, this is actually really cool. Comic books are really cool. Video games are really cool, and that's why those elements of entertainment are growing at such an exponential rate. And so, just going forward, be open-hearted. Be open-hearted to anyone who mentions that, even they have the slightest interest in it. And instead of going like, oh, you've only seen an episode? Oh, well, just don't even talk to me. Be like, oh, cool, well, let me show you the next episode. Or, oh, you read that one? You should really go ahead and read these. Here, I'll lend you the books. Be open to embrace people who are new to the culture as opposed to keeping them outside of it or, exonerating them from it because they weren't there as long as you were. Because they never will be. But you want to help promote that openness, and who knows, you might find a really, really cool friend out of it. I know I've made plenty. So anyway, just wanted to get that out of the way at the forefront of this whole conversation. So, on that note, being a geek meant being an indoor kid. When I say sports ball, I mean that in the most lovingly way. I know nothing about sports. I respect those who do, and I've played sports before, and I've gone into, I think I've maybe played 2 games of American football in my entire life. And they were both with other kids that I was trying to hang out with, and it's like Super Bowl Sunday, and they're playing football. I'm like, I should probably do this. And so by the end of the game, I'm like, okay, I kind of get the rules. I'm gonna go home. And that's cool. And I've nothing against sports. It's not my thing. So I spent most of my life growing up playing video games, watching cartoons, playing role-playing games, tabletop games, everything from the classic Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced, Second Edition, 3.0, 3.5, Pathfinder, 4th edition, all those big loves all across there, to GURPS and obscure, like Rifts and Paranoia and Cyberpunk and Shadowrun. Like, so many great tabletop role-playing games I've messed with my entire life and had so many great adventures. And it's interesting to see as I grow older and walk in different professional circles, how many people are closet geeks and have had experiences and just don't know that it's okay to talk about it. But once that forum is opened, all of a sudden everything shifts. I've been at a few entertainment parties, full-on actors and producers and directors, and everyone's networking and talking about budgets and money and casting and blah blah blah. And I get in one conversation with someone about oh man, oh yeah, I just love role-playing games, playing a lot as a kid. Oh, well, that's cool, yeah, I'm actually running a D&D game now for 2 different campaigns. They're like, what, you still play? I'm like, yeah. Like, oh, that's really cool. I play a game on Sundays too with some friends of mine from high school. Oh, that's cool. Somebody else was like, wait, you guys talking about D&D? And they joined in the conversation. All of a sudden, 2 hours later, there's a big group of 7, 8 people around going but then at level 4, when we all went out to the far end of Goskar Kingdom, we had the encounter with the Lich Lord and destroyed half of our party, and we're like, that's awesome! It's just once that door is open and it's okay to discuss, it's really surprising how many people either have been wanting a way to talk about it and discuss it and find someone that can connect on that level, or have had an interest in what it's about and haven't had a forum where it felt comfortable for them to go ahead and learn about it. That's been a really interesting means of accidental networking. I've actually got a lot of work in the past few years from people I've met at parties and talked with about role-playing games. Steve Jaros, who was the creative director on Saints Row 4 and a number of other video games, huge gaming nerd. And the first time I met him, we talked for an hour and a half about how ridiculously stupid and fun the game Rifts is. For those who aren't familiar with the Palladium Rifts universe, essentially it's a role-playing game, like tabletop pen and paper role-playing game, where it's the future, and there all of a sudden was a bunch of these dimensional rifts that opened up on planet Earth to other realms, and things came through, and magic was resurged, and the whole world is half of it's overgrown, and Mexico's full of vampires, and America is covered in this pseudo-Nazi coalition, and it just makes no sense. And the whole game is just numbers and charts. And you could be a psychic dolphin, or you could be an alien lizard man who shoots magic fire from his hands, or you could be a vagabond in plastic armor, and it's just or you could be a T-Rex driving a jet plane. Why not? It's that ridiculous. But it was fun when you're 16 and just I can do anything. And based on that, he's cast me in 3 projects. I didn't even audition. He just had me come in. And so it's been funny to see that kind of camaraderie between different geeks in any industry, let alone mine. And that connection is so important. For me, I found role-playing games as extremely important to me as an individual. The idea of being able to it's not about just like creating a character and rolling up statistics and getting equipment and killing stuff. That's fun, do a little dungeon crawler. But for me, a lot of it's been communal storytelling. There's something to be said about having a group of people together and creating a world from a GM or DM standpoint. I tend to DM most of my games just because everyone else doesn't want to put the effort into it. And then watching everyone slowly improvise and put together an entire story. And sometimes there's conflict, sometimes there's great synchronicity, sometimes there's clever escapes, sometimes there's serious botches. But regardless, all through these circumstances, these adventures, it's a beautiful communal storytelling. And at the end of it, everyone walks away excited about the fact that they were part of this adventure, and they'll go tell people that don't care about it. You're like, shut up about the game. Like, no, you don't understand. And then the dwarf tried to roll past the trap, and he fell. I'm like, just shut up. Then a week later, they'll be like, but why did the troll roll? And it's like, no, it was a dwarf. Like, oh, okay, can I come watch a game? There's a lot more interesting than you think. But the communal storytelling aspect is it's basically allowing people to go back to those imaginative days of being 6, 7, 8 years old and play fighting in your front yard and pretending like, okay, so you're the wizard and you're the bad guy and let's go. It's that for adults. And really kind of letting your imagination take it where it wants to go. And so that's been a huge part of my upbringing and a geek flag that I will let fly for the remainder of my life. I don't care what anyone else says. This is a symbol of hope in my life right here. And a symbol of death. But yeah, so for me, more so now than ever before, geek culture is prominent and it's everywhere. And in some ways the media is overblowing it and everyone's like, oh great, now geek's the new chic and everyone wants to be a geek. And on some level you can't help but feel a little frustrated that that's kind of the way it's being presented. I myself am finding it really, really fantastic. I remember back in the day when I was like 4 years old and thinking to myself, 5, 6 years old, like, man, it'd be great if there was like an X-Men movie, or like I could actually see a physical manifestation. And then years later having it happen and being like, that was okay, but still it happened, and watching it. And there's going to be failures along the way and there's some films that are awful, but still, there's still that aspect of thinking when I was a kid that this would never happen. When would Hollywood, when would the wide world at large ever be ready to accept an Avengers movie and have it do well and have it be good? Like, how could that be possible? I remember walking out of the theater when I first saw it opening night and was just like, I'm just gonna walk into traffic. I'm done. This is nothing could be better than this moment from my childhood right now. This is a sign for the future that I think is very, very inspiring. To know that people, enough money and enough talent and enough drive can be put behind a project that is essentially a giant geek fangasm. And they're working. And as long as there are people like Joss Whedon in the industry that can keep pushing for quality entertainment that he himself will enjoy as opposed to what the producers tell him, then I think we're in a good spot. Anyway, that got away from me. But there'll be a lot of that for this panel because I gave you 2 hours and I hope you're in for the ride. But yeah, so anyway, we'll eventually get to a Q&A and we'll do some back and forth, but I'm just going to talk at you for a while. There have been parts of my life where I've been bullied. There have been parts of my life where I've been put in a position where I was made to feel bad about who I was and my interests. And that's part of growing up for a lot of people. That isn't just a geek thing, that's just kids being kids, people are cruel. But it's understanding, and it's a very, very big lesson I learned growing up as well, just through those experiences and from what my parents taught me. Never ever be ashamed for who you are and what you like. And even if other people don't understand that, if it makes you happy, that's all that matters. Honestly, universally across the board. And more and more and more we're seeing not just groups of people that feel the same way and can support any sort of lesser fandom you have. And I know, yes, for those who were there yesterday at the Room 101 panel, my whole thing with Otakin, then yeah, we're all having fun, we're having a laugh too. But even that is a community of people that, even as ridiculous as it may seem, you know, of a fandom, that is something that they in their life are using, whether it be a coping mechanism for some sort of trauma or finding a community where they don't have one. And even that subculture, though we may laugh, like those people find happiness in that as well. And I can't help but respect that on a level. And I think there are so many strange, misunderstood, and in some cases just won't be understood elements of the geek subculture out there that while we may joke, we may laugh, that's still something very important and very positive for somebody out there. And as long as it's not hurting anybody else, as long as it's not, you know, turning into something aggressive, go for it. Have fun. Just don't post it on my Facebook wall. Free! Oh. I'm gonna kill you. Yeah. So like, in case you can't tell, I really have no format for this. I'm just talking out loud. I've found growing up at all these circumstances of being bullied and even shit, just focusing on the positive aspects, focusing on the friends and like-minded people, and finding some elements of not escapism, because escapism isn't necessarily a healthy thing in the long run. You want to find something that is proactive for yourself to do, and that's where I found gaming and storytelling was a very important thing for me. I also found, as the years went on, a really, really cool aspect of that was performance. Acting for me was a great outlet. It allowed me to express myself through other characters, through storytelling and getting those out. And then eventually, like, cosplay. You know, I was one of those kids that grew up in every Halloween. I spent weeks and weeks getting that perfect costume together, and then went to a convention back in 1996. And was like, whoa, there are people that do this on non-Halloween? There are other days this is okay? Awesome! And so, like, the next year I brought my Halloween costume, which I believe was Laguna Noir from Final Fantasy VIII. Brought that to a convention and wore it and was like, met a bunch of really wonderful people. And that was another aspect of self-expression where I was able to really take a fandom of mine and do a physical task, to go through the process of constructing something, making something that shouldn't exist, and personifying that, a character that I really appreciated, and I had a wonderful time. And that subculture itself, to me, was a very, very important part of my young adult life. I met so many wonderful people, and in many ways that kind of guided my career. I met a lot of people in the industry through convention scene. It's been a wonderful ride. So there isn't a single aspect of geek culture that I would ever tear down, because it's, for each person, it brings its own little positive element. And more than anything, community. Look at this whole room. Everyone is here for a sole purpose. We're here to have fun at an anime convention. We're all having experiences, positive, some negative, but overall, these are memories that we will have for the rest of our life, and these are all people that we, in some cases, will never forget, and will have with us the rest of our lives. So like, the convention circuit, these geek-centric gatherings, this is glorious. This is what makes me really happy, and makes it fun for me to come to and be a part of it. So thank you once again for having me out here for a third year. We actually had the conversation. My mom was like, I take that back. I was like, yeah, you do. Oh, there'll be a time. My first job out of high school was as a game tester. So I immediately out of there, I was like, oh, look, I'm making money. Playing video games. How's that feel? And then a year later, I was like, oh my God, I hate this job. There was a time when I was as a game tester where I couldn't play video games outside of work, because you were just playing so long, the same game for so many hours, for so many months out of a year, 2 years, that I got home and just didn't want to touch a controller. And like, that to me was like the saddest point of my career as a game tester. I worked my way up as a lead, and I was a quality assurance manager at a game development company on the development side. Pardon me, Copperberg burps. Copper burps? Yeah. And I realized I had a stack of games I wanted to play and just didn't have the inspiration to do it. And that's when I knew I had a problem. That's when I knew something was wrong. When I could stare down and look at a copy of the newly released Final Fantasy X for the PS2 and be like, I can't find a way to play this right now because I can't play games. And then I eventually played it and was like, maybe I should have left it there. No. I love 10. I love Aron and Lulu the rest of the time. But yeah, you know, there are, video games have been a very important part of my life, a very important part of me finding characters and finding stories I can connect with, just like any literary pieces. How many people out there still read books? We'll get to those shortly. That was my fine balance growing up, was reading and video games, because there was the story I could be told and there was the story I could be part of. And both had very interesting stories to tell, very wonderful characters that I could connect with and kind of teach me lessons. And that's the thing people listen to realize, stories and books and games, they're teaching you lessons. That shit's like secret lesson telling. You know, G.I. Joe was a little more overt with it at the end, you know. Don't play with fire, you'll die, G.I. Joe. You know, and a little more in your face about it. But I imagine G.I. Joe wasn't too popular in the UK. I have an inkling, unless it was like, you know, G.I. David. Please, little boy Bobby, mind the gap. But yeah, there were lessons to be learned, and through each of these stories, each character of these taught me something important about becoming an adult, and how to interact with people, and how to appreciate what I had, and how to appreciate friendship, and really I feel there were a lot of lessons I learned through video games and reading books that I feel a lot of kids that didn't have missed out on. And I feel that when they become an adult, they had to learn as a reactive, you know, method. They had to go through life, and everything they learned was immediately based on their interactions with people, which all times wasn't positive. And it made them into sometimes very bitter and very angry and very unhappy people in the long run. Whereas I feel that my experience as a gamer, my experience as a book reader allowed me to learn that, you know, forgiveness and to learn the positive aspects of friendship and how it is to really interact with people and to learn the people that you probably shouldn't interact with. You know, and there are many different ways for doing that. Religion is a really good resource for a lot of people to learn those lessons as well. My religion was video games. Which, there was a very interesting crossover in a lot of games too. I remember playing through Breath of Fire 2. Any of you guys played Breath of Fire 2? The Super Nintendo? Great RPG, wonderful story, it was incredible. But as I began playing through, like, the villain aspect of the game was like this newfound religion that was rising up in the East, and you're like, oh, interesting, you know, playing on the whole religious theme, and then you go and you finally meet the final bad guy, and it's this little 16-bit sprite of a guy with like a beard and long brown hair and a robe, and I'm like, I'm fighting Jesus? This is gonna haunt me for a while. But it was an interesting story, and it had some very interesting aspects on organized religion. I think there's a very definitive difference between religion and organized religion. I think religion has a lot of wonderful things to teach. I think there's a lot of really great lessons as well, people to learn. A lot of people that need a resource of faith, something to inspire them and keep them on the straight and narrow and be a good person. Religion's a wonderful thing. Organized religion, which has become a business in a lot of places, that I don't agree with at all, but that's a whole other panel. And so it was very interesting to kind of, after that, and like Xenogears also played on religion in a very interesting way. That was a great game. So anyway, the point is, there were a lot of really interesting, really wonderful lessons I learned through video games and through books that I felt helped form me into a person I wanted to be. And then came the role-playing games. Then somebody pulled me in my freshman year of high school and was like, "Hey man, you wanna make a character? Like, you know, like a video game?" Like, no. It's just paper and a pen. And you roll dice. And I'm like, "So there's no video?" Yeah, we just tell the story together. And I was like, okay. And so I made a character. I was like, I want to make a wizard. But there's a kid here in the second edition book that says I can make him a militant wizard, and he uses a sword. That sounds awesome. And then I played it, and was like, this is the worst combination ever. Why would a wizard ever use a sword? I have no armor on. If I get close enough to hit something with a sword, I'm gonna die. And I did. And I was like, okay, first lesson learned. Don't make wizards with swords. Take that with you, by the way. It's a lesson for all you guys out there. Wizards without swords, no. And if you ever see like a cartoon that makes a wizard that uses a sword effectively, either they're lying to you, or they rolled really well. Only answers. Okay, go back and watch those films. How well did Gandalf use that sword? Except for the Balrog battle, but that was more like everyone else is like, you know, killing orcs left and right. Gandalf's just, he wasn't good with a sword. He's just Gandalf, and people were like, okay. And it's Glamdring. I give it all to Glamdring, okay? I think Glamdring was a good sword. And Gandalf just held it. He was like an instrument for it. Yeah, no. And I love Gandalf, don't get me wrong. In the books, he sounded a lot cooler with that sword, and I love Ian McKellen's Gandalf. Didn't quite believe the sword strikes in the movie, though. Except for the Balrog fight. That was pretty intense. That was amazing. For the record, that Balrog... no film... Okay, no. 2 films have put me in this mode. The Avengers, when the helicarrier lifted out of the ocean for the first time, and when they first revealed the Balrog in Fellowship of the Ring. Those are 2 moments in film that have literally transformed me into a 6-year-old just doing this. And then 20 minutes later go... So, I give credit to that. Oh yeah.
Oh, it's this way. Ah, he's remembered. No, the air doesn't smell so foul down here.
Exactly.
Then, young Peregrine, always follow your nose.
It's a Gandalf's Fruit Loops commercial. I know. But yeah, role-playing games. I got in my first game of D&D, got in my second game of D&D when I rolled a new character who wasn't a wizard with a sword. And I realized quickly at the end that our DM was awful. He was terrible. Like, I was like, this game should be fun. But like, he was one of those DMs that made his own character as well that was in the party. I know, hold on. So he's like, all right, I'm the DM, but I'm making my character as well. And he's a paladin, the 2nd edition paladin, which we all know are like super OP, way overpowered. And seriously, it was kind of like that. All of a sudden he's like, all right, well, he's a paladin, but he's also using the fighter samurai kit because, you know, I'm the DM and I'm allow that. So he's dual wielding katanas, paladin. And he has a griffin, this is bonded mount. And for his holy sword he got for his quest for his holy sword is he woke up one morning and it was by his bed and he started blasting with his holy sword, +5 at level like 7. I'm like, I didn't know any better. I was like, that seems a lot. I have like a +1 something, like a sling. You're an asshole. And I remember, and his whole idea, I guess he played too many video game role-playing games because he'd be like, all right, you guys are going to the town, okay? And random encounter. And he'd be like, okay. You just say it like that, random encounter. And he'd just roll a d12 and be like, 7 barbarians jump out of the bush. Like, the bush, the singular bush. There's this one tiny bush in the middle of this like blank open barren badlands field where 7 barbarians jump out of. Are they compressed? Is it like compressed air? They're just like like a little pokeball of barbarians just opens up and just fly out. But this happened repeatedly the entire campaign. Is that TARDIS bush, exactly. That's from the not very popular series Dr. Y. But it was he kept having, and there were only barbarians. There was like no hippogriffs, there was no, you know, bugbears or owl bears or any bears really for that matter. Just barbarians, which of course in our heads were all just Conan. There was just 7 Conan the Barbarians jumping out of the bush. And it made this constant theme, this joke where we kept saying there was some alternate dimension somewhere. This alternate dimension that was just filled with barbarians. Just like millions upon millions of barbarians just lined up and waiting. And just getting pumped up, chewing shields, downing drinks, they're just like, "Argh!" And then occasionally like a little doorway would open. And they all just like rush out as many as they could, and they all just fly out of a bush and kill whatever's there. And so we made our secret goal to eventually get this dimension and destroy it. Never got that far because there was a game in which we had progressed to a boss fight. We killed the boss and he dropped like a +3 katana, of course. Because he only dropped magical katanas. Funny thing about that. And so one of our other friends in the campaign was a fighter character who only had like a +1 longsword. It was like, oh, that's much better than my +1 longsword. And the DM's like, yeah, but it's better than my +2 katana on my offhand. I'll take it, you can take my offhand katana. And the player's like, but then you have like a +5 and a +3, and I only have a +2 for a single weapon. Can I please have the katana? And he goes, I'll fight you for it. And I'm like, well, let's see. A paladin, specifically, has to live by a very, very stringent moral set of rules, or it loses all of its power. And so I called him on that, and he argued with me for like an hour. And so I went, okay, cool. Well, my character cuts his own throat, and I'm going home. He's like, you can't do that. I'm like, no, I did. He goes, roll to hit. Okay. Rolled. It was like a 19. He's like, okay, roll for damage. I'm like, no, it's a coup de grace. This is on myself, okay? That's a free crit. Rolled it. I'm dead. Cool, I'm going home. And I left. And that was when I decided to DM. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let somebody else control the game, and I was going to give a shot at storytelling. And so I made my own campaign, invited a handful of people from that game and a couple of friends of mine who'd never played before. And I've been DMing for 14 years, 15 years since. So.
Long campaign. That is a long campaign.
Which I miss playing characters, and occasionally I do. Occasionally I'll get like a one shot or like maybe a campaign, but it's hard to have enough free time as an adult, as I'm sure many of you know, to run a consistent game group, let alone multiple ones. You know, I have 2 campaigns I'm running right now. I'm running one for about 7 months and one for 2 years, 2.5 years now. And we play each campaign maybe once a month, once every 2 months, because we're all adults. And most of us are actors, because it's Los Angeles, and so like schedules are really wonky. But back then we could play pretty consistently. So I began running campaigns for Dungeons and Dragons, but then I began to learn other games out there. I learned about the old RPG Paranoia, which you guys are familiar with that. Those aren't. Paranoia is a game basically in the future where like everyone is in a happy future society. A very, very happy society where everyone has to be happy because the giant AI machine that runs the entire society that you're in wants you to be happy. And if you're not happy, then something's wrong. If something's wrong, you'll probably be arrested so they'll find out what's wrong. When you're arrested, you're executed. And then your clone comes in and takes over because your clone's happy. That's paranoia. But yep, hail the computer, exactly. And so it's a whole game where all the players are like trying to stay alive, but also trying to secretly like get each other arrested or trying to defend themselves by putting the blame on other people while also trying to complete the mission. It was great. It was essentially Munchkin for the RPG because it ruined friendships. Any game that ruins friendships, I always equate to Munchkin because I've watched so many friendships just explode. But yeah, Paranoia was a lot of fun. We got into Rifts briefly, and then my friend Todd, who owned every single Rifts book, which by the way was like a library. Like they had like, you know, start off like Rifts USA, Rifts UK, Rifts Africa, Rifts Japan, and you're like, all right, that's cool. And eventually it's like Rifts, Lower Quarter District of Detroit, Rifts, that southernmost island of Hawaii that nobody goes to, and you're just like, why are you still releasing books like this? And my friend Todd, who owned all these books, was so into the game, and like he's like, no, it's the best rule system ever. There's nothing like, you know, one single combat taking 4 hours. You know, every character has 7 different attacks, and you just so many dice rolling, so many tables. I love tables. Just God, you know, math. Oh, Excel sheets. Can't get enough Excel sheets. That sounds like a great imaginative experience. And so, once again, me and the party decided to show him how broken the rules were on Rifts. Because he's like, and if it's in the book, you can use it. We're like, okay, so we started researching through his books. And we found that in the Palladium Rifts universe, there was also a Macross book. That was in the world of the Palladium universe, with the rule sets and everything. So we devised a plan to beam aboard the SDF-1, take out the crew, and commandeer it. And it succeeded. Now, mind you, in all of the Palladium books, every single weapon has a damage value. Like, you know, does 1d6 mega damage, which like 1 mega damage will destroy a person. You know, there was smaller versions of damage for but mega damage was kind of the mainstay. So like, you know, a rocket launcher would do like, you know, 1d8 times 10 mega damage. And then you start getting into space combat. It's like, you know, your front lasers deal 2d6 times 1,000 mega damage. And you're like, that's stupid. And then you get like, you know, super giant planet-sized, you know, Star Wars Death Star lasers that blow up planets do like 1d4 times 10 million mega damage. You're like, why? But the SDF-1, under damage for its main laser, which took 10 minutes to charge, said, destroys anything in its path. No damage value, just gone. There's another Palladium book that they released called Pantheon, which had stats for all the gods of all the different religions. They were given stats that you could not possibly kill them. You know, they had like the entire Norse Pantheon, Thor, with all of his strength stats and all of his crazy magical abilities. He had like 600 billion hit points. And we're like, that's cool, we're gonna go one-shot Thor. And we went and got hunting. We wiped out the Norse pantheon, we wiped out the Hindu pantheon, we just like started going through the whole book, page to page, destroying deities, and then until eventually our DM was like, you know what, I'm done. He gave up, we're like, yep, Rifts is a good game. That was fun. But yeah, so I moved on from Rifts, and then 3rd edition D&D came out, and I was like, man, 2nd edition was terrible. It wasn't terrible, but everyone had 18-100 strength. Because, you know, just everyone's that lucky. And to this day, like, the 2 campaigns I run have been a lot of fun. I ran the 2-year 4th edition campaign because I wanted to give it a shot, and we had a lot of new players who had never played D&D before, and that's been a lot of fun. 4th edition has its benefits, but I've since, after playing 4th edition for 2 years, began to miss 3rd edition and went back, and my new campaign is Pathfinder. So balancing Pathfinder and 4th edition has been a very interesting trade-off, and really brings about the glaring errors in both systems each time. But the first game I'm running, they're halfway through Paragon tier now. Everyone's like around level 15. I think we've run some really, really great epic sweeping storylines to the point where one of our characters, my friend Chloe plays, is a halfling rogue. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be talking, I'm doing that guy. I'm like, all right, here's the story about my campaign, guys. Here's what happened in the game, so bear with me. Her character, she discovers what's called a fate touched, which means there are certain individuals born in this world that, you know, the threads of fate tend to just gravitate towards them. So no matter what they do in their life, their actions either, they have big impact in the world around them, or events tend to congregate around them, good or bad. You know, past historical conquerors have been fate touched in this universe, and she happens to be one. And so the party traveling with her in general is just a very dangerous thing, but also brings very cool things about. She managed to stumble upon an artifact called the Amulet of Passage, which was a true artifact, like an extremely powerful item that chooses its bearer based on their path, their future fate. And it attached itself to her, and she couldn't get rid of it at first, and now it's kind of become a part of her. She went out and just recently had it tattooed across her ankle. Like the entirety of the Amulet of Passage is around her ankle, and then the actual end of the amulet is on the top of her foot. Which I think you actually, any of you guys hear about this new sci-fi show, Heroes of Cosplay, that just aired? My friend Chloe's on that show. She's Chris Hardwick's girlfriend from The Nerdist. She gets that tattoo on the show, I think, towards the end of the season. So you'll get to see the Amulet of Passage from my D&D campaign get tattooed on her foot if you watch the show. So now this will all come together full circle. You see what's going on. But anyway, that campaign has just been this really interesting, really test, because a lot of times I've played with certain people that were, you know, very hardcore min-maxers and all about just dungeon faring. This is the first campaign I've really run where I handpicked a bunch of people that were all about story, and it's different. I like the dungeon crawl aspect as well, but it's been really fun to watch all these really emotional moments happen in the game where like characters are brought to tears. One of our characters, Louis, in the game, who plays our half-elf bard, his whole storyline was like trying to find his sister, and they were both like experimented on when they were children because of this weird like sound manipulation ability they had. And this is really nerdy talk, guys. I hope you're okay with this. He's been hunting her for the whole Paragon path, or whole heroic path, like levels 1 through 10, and he finally discovers that this research that was done on them as children has come to fruition in these things called amplifiers. They found individuals who at a young age exhibited this talent, and they converted them to be like basically a magical conduit where practitioners of magic and arcane arts could focus their rituals through the amplifier, and the magical output would be like tenfold. But the process of creating an amplifier involves like sewing their mouth and eyes shut, putting giant mitts of like soft cotton over their hands and feet, so then they'd walk to us delicately, because even just the slightest impact of vibration could cause them to begin to amplify the vibration and destroy themselves. So it was a horrible, horrible process. And when he discovered that this was the fruits of the research that was done on him and his sister, when they were very young, he began to just bawl. And he was like trying to interrogate or to talk to this one amplifier he had in contact with, and he was just crying and then just getting in this really emotional fury. And I was like, oh shit. I wasn't sure if he like got a call earlier about like his mom died and like he's just trying to role play through it, or he was really in the moment. And it's moments like that to me that really make it worthwhile as a DM and as a gamer to really see players take the story to that level and feel impacted by the character's persona. I'm a big proponent for letting each player give you backstory, write a little bit of a history for their character and a hook, and finding a way to incorporate them there and just tweak those heartstrings and find a way to involve them, find a way that they'll go back and tell people about the story in hindsight. And this is one of those moments. And then eventually he found his sister, and they were partying for a while, and she was an NPC, and there was kind of this really tearful reunion. And then they all discovered the next part of their adventure required them to travel to the Shadowfell, which for those of you not familiar with the universe, basically it's like a parallel universe with the prime material plane that is similar in structure, but it's all negative energy, it's all shadow energy, and it's kind of this twisted, warped version of the world that everyone lives in. And while they're down there, they encounter, in this catacomb, a group of ghouls. In this world, necromancy and undead had been abolished 200 years ago, and it was, at this point, nearly a myth. Like, the whole idea of undead was a fairy tale. Well, they encountered ghouls, and they weren't prepared for it, and they did poorly, and 3 of the party members were killed and eaten alive in front of the other 2, one of which was Chloe. She's screaming in tears, trying to tell me like she's going to go back and save them and pull the bodies off. And one of the other party members, Conrad, who's the ranger, is like holding her back, saying there's nothing we can do, there's nothing we can do. And he's pulling her out of the room, and she's screaming and crying. And we spend the rest of the session with the 3 other players silent, as the 2 of them just cope with the loss of their friends and just have this extremely emotional breakdown. He's like trying to comfort her. They both walk solemnly across the plains. They encounter the crossroads with this giant, like, crucified skeleton that kind of points the way if you ask a direction where you want to go. They go to the city of Gloomrot, and they just sulk. And that was the end of the game. It was one of those like moments where I finished it, and everyone was just quiet. I'm like, I hope that was good. I hope I didn't ruin your week. I didn't expect them to die. And then they all came, and then as they played out, had them all make new characters, or the people that died make new characters. They came in as a previous party that had also been kind of destroyed. The Shadowfell, and they joined. And they went through this whole quest process where they went to the Raven's Eyrie, which is essentially this giant cathedral to the Raven Queen, which is the goddess of this neutral goddess of magic and death. And they basically went to her and said, or to her followers and the priest there, and said, is there anything you can do to help bring our friends back? And they said it's a very low chance, if it's even viably possible, but you need to recover their bodies. And so they went back with vengeance, and they prepared this time involving buying holy waters and negative energy potions, and they just destroyed those ghouls with fury. And they found them, they burned the bodies, and they went and retrieved all the bones that were left over of their comrades and dragged them back to the Shadowfell, brought them to the Eyrie, and they threw the bones into this giant pool of blood, essentially, that sits into the worship chamber for the Raven Queen, and said could they have a communion with her, and the priestess said, you can certainly try. It's up to her if she wants to respond. They all disrobe and step into the pool of blood, submerging themselves afterward, and they have a communion with the Raven Queen, which she silently tells Chloe's character, who is the fate touched, of course, and so all these big things seem to be focused on her, whether she wants it or not. Said, you know, your friends, their souls still hang within my realm of influence. I could choose to bring them back. They may not come back the same, but for each one you must offer a sacrifice. I will not tell you what that sacrifice is worth. If it is not, if what you offer isn't a worthy sacrifice, I will deny it and you will never see them again. So you have to offer what you are sure is worth of their life. And it was this very intense moment where she had to make these decisions. And so immediately one of the guys who wanted his character back was like, I sacrificed my character! and so he sacrificed his life, the other guy, which kind of worked for his character story. I was like, I'll let that slide. And so he got his dwarf rumble back. Which, by the way, the guy who plays that dwarf, his name is Brian Prisco. He's an actor in Los Angeles. He's about 5'2", bald on top, giant beard, rotund gentleman. He is a dwarf. So when he chose a dwarf for his character, I was like, yes. And then Louis, who was the bard, the half-elf bard, his character had been killed. He took over. His new character was his sister. And so he began playing as his sister, and he had his sister sacrifice her life for her brother. And so basically this whole game, he had been searching for his sister. He finally found her, and then she ends up giving her life for him. And it was this really horrible, beautiful moment where he himself was like, even his own decision made him cry. And I'm like, all right, Louis, you're crying a lot. That's cool, but maybe I need to lighten up on your storyline a little bit. And sure enough, she gave her life, but because they were like brother, sister, I'm pretty sure twins, there were aspects of their spirits that were essentially like a single soul divided, so now they were truly whole, and he then became a hybrid class where he pulled in bits of her sorcerer and his bard, and kind of now he's almost like an amalgam of the two characters going forward. And then Chloe, who couldn't find a sacrifice worthy, like couldn't sacrifice anybody else, and wanted to offer a sacrifice herself, and Raven Queen was like, no, you have too many important things to do, you know. As a fate touch, that's not your choice to make, that's fate's choice to make. And so she said, well, I offer myself as your indentured servant, my soul is yours. And Raven Queen was like, I'll accept that. Brought back our friend Taliesin. Actually, Taliesin Jaffe is also in the campaign. You guys know him, he's a voice actor, voice director. Brought back his wizard Aldous, and now, since then, she's basically never heard from the Raven Queen. But she knows that she is completely within her sphere of influence. And it's been this kind of ominous thing that's been building and building, and I'm going to have fun with that too. The other campaign we're running, the Pathfinder one, started back in December. It wasn't supposed to be a campaign, it was supposed to be one shot. And I mentioned this a little bit in my panel yesterday. Liam O'Brien, who's a voice actor, many of you may have heard his work. Remember, he's Gaara in Naruto, he's in a billion video games and anime. He also grew up playing D&D and reading Dragonlance. And he found out that I was still running D&D games, and he hadn't played in like 15, 20 years. And so for his birthday, he's like, hey Matt, is there any possibility maybe you could like run a game for me? I was like, yeah, sure, hell yeah, I'd love to. So I run a game, build a little one-shot story, and make characters for a bunch of people who had never played before. By people who had never played before, I mean Sam Riegel, Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, Orion Akaba, my girlfriend Marisha Ray, and she had played before, but like all these voice actors had never played before at all. And so they all walk in, and I have like candles up and music playing, and the table's set, and I'm like, come sit. And that look on their face like, oh God. What have I done? But 20 minutes in, they were all totally into it, and they realized, oh, this is how it works. This is, whoa, okay, you can do anything. And they got totally into it, and we finished the game session, we had a good time, everyone was drinking, they put it on their podcast, and then about 3 days later, the email went out from Travis and was like, so guys, when are we going to play again? And I was like, yes. And so we've been playing every now and then since then, and it's just gotten ridiculous. We've had our recent session where they basically, one of the games, Travis couldn't make it, so his character Grog, who's a giant, half-giant barbarian, of course, was just disappeared, because he couldn't beat that one particular game. So they went to find him, discovered him. He was under the influence of some undead force. They managed to bring him back, but he had these stitch marks on his chest. They went and had him examined by a local arcane practitioner and discovered that a lich phylactery had been implanted in his chest. For those who don't know what a lich phylactery is, essentially, a lich is a great, extremely powerful, evil, undead wizard. Like, full-on, like, skeletal, gem-encrusted, long robes, just like extremely dangerous, powerful, undead wizard. Part of their undeath is they seal a part of their essence into a tiny little object, like a gem or a tube of their dark energy. That's called a lich's phylactery, and they hide it. They hide it somewhere in the world, and as long as that phylactery isn't destroyed, whenever a lich's physical form is destroyed, they can't actually die, and they'll slowly regenerate near it. It's Sauron's ring, you know, it's the Horcrux. It's that kind of a thing for a lich. And apparently one of these has been put inside Travis's character's chest. So now they're trying to currently get that out of him. And that involved a bunch of ridiculousness, such as Sam Riegel trying to convince somebody that he was a different character by putting a mustache on his finger. He's a little gnomish bard who rhymes everything he does. It's amazing. There was a sequence where they were trying to get into a cult who was currently summoning a dark envoy from the shadow plane so they could kill its mount, which is a nightmare, so they can get its skull as part of this ritual to remove the phylactery. This is all a lot of information. I'm just in a mode. Pardon if it all sounds like Greek to you, but they in order to get into this ritual, they discovered it was some sort of a sacrifice, like an actual life sacrifice. And they began talking around the small town, and a lot of the local prostitutes have been vanishing, and people are the ladies of the night, so they're like, that's not good, and that's also a way in. So the ladies of the campaign, Laura, Marisha, and Ashley Johnson, which you guys probably know from different films and stuff, but most recently as Ellie in The Last of Us, little girl.
Ellen Page?
Don't bring that up again. But she has a little gnome cleric, and so the three of them all dressed kind of best they could. None of their characters were really that type of females. So they're like, I guess this looks kind of sexy. and they presented themselves to the individual they had found was part of the cult as like, hey, what are you doing tonight? And they looked about, and they all made their charisma checks, and all were pretty low, even though everyone else had high charisma, except for Ashley's character. So they chose the little gnome girl. And she was like, okay. They had this whole sequence where they brought her up on top of a hill at night, on a new moon, it was just a dark sky. And the party had already set up an ambush in the outskirts of it, and they start doing the ritual, and there's this little slab on the ground with a small, like a concrete or like a stone funnel for the blood to run down into a chamber beneath. And the party's like waiting for the right moment to strike, and all of a sudden the guy grabs her by the throat and pulls her up and pulls the blade out. And it was basically like a straight up, you guys waited too long to spring your attack. This is now an initiative order thing. If nobody manages to beat this guy on initiative, she's gonna be in real serious trouble. She couldn't show up in armor or anything. There was a lot of, D&D prostitutes showing up in full plate like, hey, what's going on? Wanna go? Although I'm pretty sure the orcs would be fine with that. That's just an extra fun 30-minute layer to get through. But yeah, so Laura's character finally managed to break the initiative order, take a shot off, deflect the blade, and she spent most of the battle escaping and trying to get into her armor. But it was one of those really tense possible, like, you guys could lose a character right now because of your decisions, but if it works out, this is a really cool plan. And it did, and it worked out well. Now they're going to find the heart of a nymph. That'll be interesting. Anyway, we talked a lot about role-playing games. All of you guys who are into role-playing games, it's awesome. I'm glad you endured this. People who aren't into role-playing games, once again, I'm really glad you endured that talk. But yeah, I'm really nerdy about that. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's open to some questions now, because I've been talking a lot just myself. Let's get some fun questions going on. I saw a hand over here, and then we'll move up there, and we'll come down here. I'm trying to also be conscientious of our microphone runner who has been given the gamut today so far.
Hey, I'm sorry to hammer on with role-playing games still, but how do you rate Pathfinder and 4th edition? Or like, are there any other games that you rate higher than that? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each system?
Oh, just a quick question. I'll try and condense as much as possible. I like 4th edition's ability to give a lot of combat classes more options in battle beyond just like do damage or do more damage. That was a big issue with like 2nd edition. It was fixed a little bit in 3rd edition, but I never felt the interest in playing a combat class in 3rd edition because of that. So I always went with like casters and wizards and rogues and things that had more utility and more options at their disposal for both role-playing and combat. 4th edition gave the ability for fighter classes to actually like mark guys and keep them in close combat and do like circular attacks and jump attacks and things that would stun people and knock them down. And there were those options in previous editions, but it was like you had to put like 4 feats into it to get there. And it was this whole long like 6 to 8 level process to finally learn how to stun someone. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. You're now like a 2-trick pony. So I like that they did that. Plus the fact that I like the idea that a wizard, a person who practices magic their entire life, a person who has been through academies in the arcane arts, shouldn't run out of the ability to lift a book with magic. The fact that there was a limitation on 1st level spells, the fact, or 0 level spells, the fact that a person can, shoot a magic missile twice and then be done, is ridiculous to me. I think that's your sword, it's your weapon. So I liked how there was like at-will spells and dailies and stuff like that. That was cool, but it turned the game into such a game. It turned it into a board piece moving thing as opposed to an imagination-based experience once you got into combat. So that was a little frustrating, and that was a little bit of a deterrent for me from 4th edition in that regard. But I enjoyed aspects of it. The skill challenge thing was a cool way to deal with encounters that weren't specifically battle-based. The fact that you could just like have certain circumstances in a row when there was danger involved and have the players decide what skills to use as part of a challenge, and the number of successes versus the number of failures decided whether or not they succeeded at the whole event. I thought that was a cool, quick system of putting together some interesting circumstances. So I enjoyed that. But then Pathfinder is just so customizable, and the rule set from 3.5 in Pathfinder I felt just allowed you a lot more role-playing options in general. But more than anything, customization. And it allowed battle to be simpler, whereas 4th edition, once you get like to level 10, level 15, God forbid level 30, there's so many options between abilities your magical items have that are like encounter powers or daily powers, and then you have the abilities that your class gives you, and then you have the powers that your Paragon path gives you, and then you have the abilities that you learn from your side path, and every single time you have, alright, what are you going to do in battle? You're like, okay, I'm gonna No, I'm gonna. Well, I can. No, I already used that. I'll for my free action. You know, you're like, oh. All those of the players are like. There's just too many options. I think at the higher levels of 4th edition, it really bogs down combat. So that's a little frustrating. Whereas in Pathfinder, the options are more limited, but they're more customizable. So you can still make a character that you enjoy that goes in the direction you want it to, but it's a little more fast-paced once you get into battle. And I'm a big proponent of using role-playing elements in battle. Like if you're in the middle of fighting and you don't have a special attack that lets you, throw a chair at someone, but you want to throw a chair at someone, fucking throw a chair at someone! Just tell me, I'm gonna throw a chair. I'm like, alright, I'll figure out the skill checks you have to make to do it, how much damage it deals, and the impact it has in the battle. It might not be much, but it's fun flavor, So I let the players pretty much do whatever they want to. Just might not succeed, and if it's a really ridiculous thing you want to do, that might end up very poorly afterward. But let you do it, The freedom to do whatever you want really, I think, is the key to a good role-playing game. And the players, if they decide to be stupid about it, well, then there'll be really interesting consequences. So yeah, that's a quick one. I could have a whole panel on the Pathfinder versus 4th edition thing. All right, next question up here, and then we'll start coming across. Big old fuzzy blue.
Hello.
Hello.
I was just wondering, how do you feel towards people who say that reading comic books isn't actually reading?
I think they're ignorant. It's a different form of reading. And there was a time period, like mind you go back and read some of the comics from the 60s and 70s, and you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's not reading. Like, haha, Hulk, I have used my power rays from the sun's reflection that'll cause your pants to shrink. And the Hulk goes, oh, my pants, they are shrinking. How can you make my pants shrink with the sun rays? If only I had the stone of Gar. And you're like, this is awful. This is terrible. Thank God Jack Kirby's there to make the art at least interesting, because this is a terrible story. They weren't all like that, but a lot of it was just shit. And much like, English dubbing anime, those early terrible examples, unfortunately, gave the rest of the genre a really bad rap for a long time. But the more and more talented more and more talented writers that got involved, like through the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, with like, the Uncanny X-Men especially, there began to be an era with like Chris Claremont and Alan Moore, and people that were coming forth and really testing the genre, and really finding ways to create really intricate, dark, deep, fucked up characters and stories, and really finding this as a medium to tell wonderful tales that I feel have drastically changed what it is as an art form. And it is an art form. Comic books is a wonderful art form. And people that say that are those that aren't doing their research and are speaking out of a complete ignorance, a lack of knowledge about the medium. So that's my opinion on them. Next question. Let's go back up there at the far end. Okay, a little bit. Hi.
I don't know if you've watched Sword Art Online before, have you?
I may have a brief villain character in it.
My question to you is, obviously you're a gamer, of course. Who isn't? What do you think, how much do you think it would impact real life if that sort of holographic gaming came into real life? How would that impact you? How do you think that would impact sports and things like that?
If that were a viable option, it would be really dangerous. Because there would be a lot of people that just wouldn't leave. God knows, I would spend way too much time in there, personally. The ability, and this is another great thing I think from the video game standpoint, there are a lot of points in life where you just don't have the ability to really seek adventure, where you're just stuck doing, being a responsible adult and paying bills and working, and you need that sense of adventure and to look through these stories to really kind of inspire you and keep you going. To be able to be that immersive and to really make that in essence a replacement reality for you to that degree, I I think it would be a very dangerous place where you spend most of your life creating this other reality and then don't care at all about the actual reality. But conversely, if you get to a point where everyone is part of that other reality, what's to say that isn't the new reality? So, you know, if everyone is part of that world continuously, then essentially you'd be missing out if you were in the real world. Because really, when it comes down to it, it's friendships, adventures with people, and the memories you make as you get older. And if you make those memories with people in a game, this every bit is viable. I have many, many friends I've met in World of Warcraft who were people that either had serious physical impairments or were much older and didn't have the ability to really connect with the younger audience and make friends that were of like mind but from far away. And this allowed them to connect and meet wonderful people and allowed themselves to express themselves in a comfortable atmosphere where they otherwise were either too shy or were generally not visually who would hang out with those people in a real life setting. So taking away those boundaries and letting a person be who they really are on the inside, I think is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I've seen it allow people to grow into beautiful people in the real world. It's built confidence for a number of individuals I know being in these online games and then carrying those experiences out into their life afterward. So, if the world were to allow a sort of online type thing, I think it would be very interesting. I think you would have to be careful about how much time you spend in there because it would be really easy to get lost and never want to come out. So, that's my opinion. As vague as it is. Thank you. Let's move down this way. Gentleman here. Okay. Like how you jingled the ears for me, that was awesome. It's like an audio beacon.
You said you did like Final Fantasy X. Well, the ones since then have been even more sort of 50-50 with people. What are your opinions on more other recent Final Fantasies?
I didn't dislike 10. Let me get that off the bat. I enjoyed 10. I got all my characters to level 99. I unlocked all their damage limits. I got all their, epic level weapons. Because I'm that ridiculous gamer who has to max everything out. For me, and this will be to all of you. And I've had people ask me that weird obtuse question: "What's your favorite number?" People are like, 42, or whatever. My favorite number is 9,999. Because that means either you're at max hit points or you've done max damage, and that's a beautiful fucking number. It's sacred. So no, I enjoyed 10. I was coming off of Final Fantasy 9, which I really, really enjoyed. That was a big love letter to all the classic Final Fantasy players, and I'd played every single Final Fantasy up to that point. Final Fantasy 1 was my first console RPG. Actually, no, sorry, Dragon Warrior was. Final Fantasy 1 was the first console RPG that I played all the way through multiple times. I played 2 and 3 on emulator, fan translated, because they weren't available yet back in the day. Played 4, which was 2 in the States when it came out. Played 5, also on a fan translated emulator, and then eventually when it came out properly, played 6, played 7. 6 I think is the best Final Fantasy, story-wise. 6 was just so incredibly written, the pace of the story, everything was just so wonderfully done. 7 I think is my favorite. It's not the best, I acknowledge that it's not the best, but it's my favorite because when it came out, it had such an impact on me. And so going down that line from 6 to 7 to 8, I like 8, and then to 9, and then to go to 10, it was like, okay, Yuna is, I don't know what Yuna is. Yes, I did it, I became a summoner. I was like, oh, I don't care about you. This love story is completely missed on me. And so I was like, but alright, Lulu, they're awesome. And then they made X2, and I'm like, and they're not in the game practically. Okay, good job. And Waka, really? Waka's the one that got you pregnant, really? Okay. He's your brother, that's weird. But yeah, so I played 11, the online one. I played it out of spite. Because I wanted it to be good, I really did, and it was so designed for that I don't have a life Japanese gamer type of grind, and I remember playing 6 months of it and then just finally giving up and selling my account. And then I played 12, and I enjoyed 12, I did. I felt the storyline was cool, I thought the voice acting was a definite step up from 10 in a lot of ways, but I didn't like that all the summons were ships. I wanted to actually see like beasts, you know, the like classics, Leviathan, Ifrit, they're a ship. Well, okay. And I felt the world was cool, but the gambit system, the battle system was too close to Final Fantasy XI for my tastes. It didn't feel like a real Final Fantasy battle system, and that was when I stopped playing. I've kind of given up on Final Fantasy past then. I've heard 13 was fun for a lot of people, I guess, and that's fun. I know, and then it sucks, because my friends Ali and Troy are in there, and like they do a great job, and I can't bring myself to put the time in. I have so little free time to play video games, I'd rather just put it towards, you know, more Dark Souls. If I had the choice. So I lovingly look back on the nostalgia of Final Fantasy that once was. Like I played Final Fantasy Tactics on my iPad the whole flight here to England, so like, you know, my love is there, it will never go away, but it's that memory of things lost. Things that were once great, no longer. So, yeah. Next question. Let's pull someone from over here. I want to make you run, and then we'll come back through. We've got time, I think. Yeah, we got like 45 minutes. We've got plenty of time for questions. Don't worry, we'll get to you guys. We'll get to y'all. Hello.
Now, you say you GM quite a lot. Well, I'm a GM too, and one of the fundamental laws of GMing is that no matter how much effort you put into the campaign, no matter how intricate your character is, the players will somehow manage to completely fuck it up. What's the funniest way your players have completely screwed you over?
Well, on that note first, before I answer the question, that to me that's my joy in the game. Like, I will spend a lot of time writing a story and trying the best I can to fill out multiple paths that they might take and choices, but invariably they'll end up most of the time going in a direction that you weren't expecting. And that puts me in a spot of, I've had entire sessions that are improvised based on that, and I love that. I love when the players keep me on my toes. And it's hard, and it's stressful, and it's really weird, and I love it. And it goes in really strange places that I now have to incorporate into the story. But I love that. So, preparing for that is difficult, and really what that just comes with improvised experience. I found that, it works for performance as well, but if someone wants to really be like a good diehard GM or DM for a game, take some improv classes. Not only is it just a fun thing to do, but God, those skills will help you to be able to just make decisions on the fly and let the story take itself where it needs to go, and have something ready whenever the player has an action, have a reaction to it immediately without having to go like, oh, you're gonna punch the cardinal. Well, give me a minute. I suppose going, okay, go ahead and roll. All right, you deck him. He goes down, and now the guards are swarming. What are you gonna do now?
I know that feel.
Exactly. It's like, so it's just being confident and knowing that you can come up with something to react to that. And as a GM, it's all reactionary. Your whole job is to be reacting to what the players are doing. To answer your question, let's see, one of the weirdest things the players have ever done. There's been a few really interesting things. I had a game I was running a Ravenloft game for 2.5 years for a lot of friends. Classic Ravenloft, like the full-on, the old school module, but for 3.5. The Expedition to Ravenloft was the booklet. And it was like the only real module I've run that wasn't originally written. And they had a point early in where they had gotten to the town of Barovia that had been overrun by undead zombies, and they had worked their way to one of the village heads, and he basically was discussing that Strahd, Baron Strahd, this figure that lived up in Castle Ravenloft, kept coming into the town at mysterious times and visiting the daughter of the Burgmeister of Barovia, and I think her name was Ivana, something like that. It's been a while. Anyway, so they went to go talk to her, and they were asking her about him, and she was saying like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know any visits. And then they see like the teeth marks on her neck, and they're like, oh shit. One of my players, the immediate reaction is, she's a vampire, I attack her. And like, yes! The process doesn't, he's like, but I attack her. I'm like, why? He goes, because if she is a vampire, then I'm going to kill her, and if not, she's going to become one, so it saves her the trouble. And I'm like, okay! Roll for attack. He rolls for attack. Critical 20. He decapitates her in the middle of like her answering a question. against his character. He was, I'm pretty sure, because he's a douchebag, chaotic neutral, like the I can do anything alignment. But you know, it was in self-defense. They had to spend the rest of the game in the wilderness of Barovia, which is a very dangerous place, because they were not welcome back in Barovia at all. And by the way, they just killed essentially what was Baron Strahd's love interest, and the woman that he saw in her the image of his one long-lost love. So what was essentially written in this story to be a rescue mission for the entire campaign, she was now dead. So instead it became oh Jesus Christ, he's throwing everything at us for the next 6 levels. Let's try and survive. So that was a bit of a monkey wrench. Like 4 sessions into a 2-year campaign. That's the big one. That was fun. Alright, next question. Okay.
You said you were a gamer from a young age. I'm quite curious. What was your first console? And also, what's your favourite console?
My very, very first console was the Atari 2600, of which my favorite game on that was The Empire Strikes Back. Partially, it was the one where you're flying over the ants. But partially I liked it because I found out that if you just flew above them all, and you just kept going, the game would just go faster and faster and faster. And so I left it on overnight with the TV off, and I woke up in the morning, turned it on, and it was just like an epileptic seizure. And I was like, that's cool. This is the Atari. There wasn't much in the game, so like that was the coolest part of it. I was like, that's my favorite game. Because if I had epilepsy, I'd be in the hospital. My least favorite game was E.T., because I actually own a copy of that. That was a terrible birthday present. Still bear the scar. But yeah, so that was my first console. Then went up to the NES, and that was the real like moment. Able to jump in with the original Mario Brothers, then Mario Brothers 2, Final Fantasy. There's so many great games there. God, the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. The original terrible Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Konami game, side scroller that was just absolute bullshit. Oh, so hard. Then, what was the second half of the question? My favorite console? Super Nintendo. There have been great consoles since, but like the sheer body of quality games, like the percentage of the Super Nintendo, you'd be hard pressed to find a game that wasn't at least somewhat fun, you know. And the volume of just quality games on that system was incredible, and like especially for the system's limits. Those games still hold up today. If you pop in Chrono Trigger right now and be like, this is awesome! You know? Like, that's fantastic. Super Metroid, still a fucking amazing game! Can't say that about a lot of other systems of that era, you know? And there are a lot of systems now that have great games, but there's so few games that come out now because the cost is so high and the quality is so variable. The PlayStation was an amazing system, and it had like some incredible games, but it had so many more awful games. So many. Like that was the bargain bin, was the PlayStation game aisle. You know, with like a handful of really amazing ones that came out of it. But that was just a flaw. It wasn't really a flaw of the system, but the game was so easy to develop. The system was so easy to develop for that everyone was a startup company for the PlayStation, and they could just shit out like low quality edutainment titles or licensed games based off of popular movies that are coming out because people will buy it anyway, and they're awful. Yeah, definitely Super Nintendo. That's my baby. Next question, right behind you, actually. We'll go up in the corner, and then we'll start heading to the center here. Trying to make it easiest on you, buddy.
Okay, after mentioning it 2 years ago, how do you feel that Marvel have finally realised they're fucking when they're bringing Kurt Wagner back?
What was the last part?
They're bringing Nightcrawler back.
Oh, yes. No, yes. I mean, I knew it was going to happen, because it's Marvel, and, like, no one ever dies forever. So there's a little part of me that's, like, disappointed that they couldn't keep a permadeath again, but it's fucking Nightcrawler. It's going to happen.
Cancer at Marvel to stay dead.
Yeah, and even that's, give it time. No, I'm ecstatic, because the moment the Nightcrawler died was the moment that I stopped reading Marvel. Which I hear is a sad thing, because there's been a lot of good stories. But now that I hear he's back, like, literally I downloaded a whole bunch of PDFs and I'm catching up on like New Avengers and all this stuff. Now that I'm like, oh, Nicholas come back, I can read again. But yeah, so I'm excited. Kurt's my guy. This question up there in the corner. Just throw it. It's fine, right?
Conversation I've had with a few people so far this weekend. What was your parents' reaction to your nerdy lifestyle?
My parents were pretty cool with it. It comes from the fact that my grandmother on my dad's side, like she raised me, whenever I go over and visit, she owned a Nintendo as well. And so we trade games. She traded me Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I traded her the Three Stooges game. Both awful games, but whatever. And she was the one that read me a lot of old Piers Anthony fantasy novels when I go to sleep, or she read me Lord of the Rings for the first time. So like my grandma already was a huge geek on my dad's side, and he was raised around that. So he himself, while not really a geek, he was a musician. Not to say that musicians can't be geeks, but he was more of like, I played guitar in the 70s and, toured and do drugs. It wasn't a foreign thing to my parents necessarily. There was my mom being like, you should go outside more, stop playing video games, you'll never get a career. And, but it was all kind of sort of, not oppressive, not a disrespectful or non-understanding way, because there were times where my mom would sit and play Super Mario with me. My dad would play games with me every now and then. He raised me on Warner Brothers cartoons. They were very open to it. I know a lot of people don't have that and aren't as blessed as I was to have had parents that were very understanding of that. But that's something you just kind of have to work through. If they can't understand that geek aspect of your life, then you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt and do what makes you happy. And eventually, I think as long as you do so respectfully and just say, like, look, this makes me happy. Even if you don't understand it, you don't respect it, this is what brings me joy in life and I think is an important aspect of my personal development, then I should continue doing it, whether or not you approve. And eventually they'll have to respect that. And when they see the person you become as you get older in life, I think they will respect that. My parents were very open about that. I mean, I actually remember tried running a D&D game for my parents and my brother once. Once. It got weird. My dad was like, I'm gonna make a bard, I'm gonna name him Fender. I'm like, oh, you're such a musician. My mom made an elven wizard, and like within the first role-playing encounter of the party meeting each other, my dad and my mom's characters just were flirting, and I was like, this is fucking weird, we're done. My dad's like, well, I go up to the elven maiden, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm done, I'm out. We're not playing this anymore. I haven't thought about that in a while. I think I've blocked it out. Thanks, guys. Thanks for wrenching that out of my memory bank. All right, next question. Let's go right up there next to you, and then we'll start moving into the middle aisle. This way.
Hi, I was just thinking about Dungeons and Dragons. I was actually raised by a couple of students at university who grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, so they were playing D&D with me from about the age of 10. With my family, which is kind of cool.
That's
but
awesome.
we were playing AD&D. Have you ever played the original D&D?
I have
where your
since.
armor class is -5, and that's really good.
Oh, Thaco, what a wonderful thing. I remember back. I played the editions where the classes were fighter, thief, magic user, elf, and dwarf as a class, which is kind of racist. But yeah, no, I've played some of those old editions a few times since then. Like I didn't start with them, but I played them in hindsight. And I think those games were designed to punish people. It wasn't about having an adventure and telling a story more, it was like the DM being an asshole and you trying to beat the DM. It was like players versus DM. Maybe that was just the people I played it with, but that was my experience with those old rule sets where it was just so harsh and death was so common. You had to build like 4 characters and have them in a queue, just ready, so you can play through the rest of the session you had planned. Do you have a similar experience?
Not really, but it's more a case of with the previous, with the early D&Ds, we played for 10 years and I got to level 7. That was, as far as we got. But my mum was a pretty cool DM.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good on you.
We then taught her how to play Crystal Chronicles with the Game Boy. There were too many buttons on this controller. But then, 5 years later, she was playing Oblivion on the Xbox. So.
Good on you. See, you can teach an old dog new tricks. That's awesome.
Nothing to say about it.
All right, now moving into the center section here. Gentleman here with the big coat.
Hi.
Hello.
For role-playing games, do you have a favourite specific setting or a favourite type of setting, and why?
Most of my settings are originals. I like to create my own settings. I like to have very stringent control over the type of world it is, but I really enjoy the Forgotten Realms setting, just because it's been so long established, and there's just really cool elements and really cool characters in the world that are kind of well known. That when if you're playing a game for a year and a half and you run into Driz Doran, the party's like, oh shit, hi, it's like running into a celebrity, even if it doesn't end well. But I like that aspect of it. I'm also a big fan of the Eberron setting. Eberron's really, really cool, and I actually had the pleasure of becoming friends with Keith Baker, who created the setting, and I just nerded out on it hardcore. We were at a celebrity D&D event in Los Angeles, and I was like, Keith, hi, nice to meet you. Eberron's really cool. I'm gonna go sit down. Well played. Yeah, those are probably my two preferences there. Ooh, next question this way. Let's come down here, and then we'll come up to you guys over there. 2 questions here. We'll start with, ladies first, and then we'll get to you.
What's your opinion on the Dungeons and Dragons movie?
I went and saw that opening night in the theater with my gaming group, and it turned into a fine episode of Mystery of Science Theater 3000. I remember the credits rolling, and I stood up in the theater by myself and loudly exclaimed, "Wow, this makes my game look awesome!" It was pretty bad. Jeremy Irons trying so hard. Like, I don't know if you've seen any of these special features, because, I own that shit on DVD. They have some deleted scenes, and they have some bloopers and outtakes, and like that. They have one sequence with Jeremy Irons is like having the sequence towards the end where he's clutching like the rod of Red Dragon control, and he's like, "Now the rod is mine. The kingdom shall also be mine." He charges off. He's just so fucking done with being part of this movie, and everyone on set's like. And then it freeze frames in the background. One of the extras, it circles, and it's like, "Gary Gygax." And I'm like, "Oh, Gary, what have you done?" It's a pretty bad movie. But it's cheesy in an enjoyable way. I was just happy to see D&D on film at first, but it's just so bad. And then they made a sequel. A straight-to-DVD sequel. And I saw it in Blockbuster, back when Blockbuster still existed. And I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna be so great. It's gonna be so bad." And I rented it, and I got home, and I watched it, and it was awesome. It was really good. Like a bunch of no-name actors that actually did a decent job, and the party was an actual mentoring party, and they all used their abilities, and it had a coherent story. And the only downside is it had the villain from the first movie, the guy who had the blue lipstick and the thing in his ears, was the returning villain, and he was every bit as cheesy as he was in the first film. But it was genuinely enjoyable, and I was like, why is this so much better than the first one? Why couldn't this have been the first one? The barbarian actually goes into this big old powerful female berserker, a barbarian that gets into battle and starts raging and almost cuts through her friend and stops herself barely, and there's the thief that goes into text traps and disables it, and everyone's fully using the abilities. They have the wizard that teleports incorrectly halfway into a wall and loses an arm, and I'm like, this is what D&D's fucking about! Yeah! So if you haven't seen the sequel to the D&D movie, go give it a look. It's pretty good. I mean, it's cheesy, it's low budget, but I dig it. It's effects-wise, it's just above Xena and Hercules. So don't go in there expecting a glorious expose of special effects, but it's fun. It's a good, fun, good D&D movie. I highly recommend it. And your question?
So, given sort of video games increasing popularity and coverage in the media, and a couple of scandals and internet sensations about sort of gender, sexuality, transgender, do you think that video games should be trying to sort of push the whole equality thing like BioWare have been trying to do, sometimes quite cringingly?
I feel it should be pushed where it fits. I don't feel like it should be shoehorned into a story to the detriment of a story, because then it feels like it's about the message and not about the actual game. And I feel that actually is a disservice to the transgender community, or the gay, lesbian, transgender community. I think if it fits the story, then do it right, do it properly. It's not about, it shouldn't be about the fact that they are. It should be about the fact that these are characters and these are relationships that happen. And if it just happens to be a homosexual relationship, then so it is. And if people aren't okay with that, welcome to life. Welcome to how the world works. Welcome to human society, you know? And it shouldn't be pushed in people's faces per se, but it is a part of life that happens. And if people don't want to see that, then that's their prerogative and they can walk away from it. But I don't think that it's fair for people, bless you, I don't think it's fair for people to speak out against that or to want less of that. And I'm actually really enjoy the way that BioWare has been very, very upfront, very proactive, and very loud with their opinion on the matter. Even if it does come across a little weird in some of the games. God, some of the Dragon Age love scenes are so awkward. They're all awkward. The most awkward, if you guys haven't seen Dragon Age, there is a way to actually like get a four-way. How? It's between this one woman we meet in the bar. It's with, is it Liara? Or I think it is. Yeah. Liara and the assassin guy. Yeah. And there's just one way to get it to happen, and honestly, it was beautifully done. It was just how it should have been. Where like, you kind of see a little bit, and the next morning, it's just like this really awkward conversation of everyone like really kind of regretting that it happened, and I'm like, exactly! This is the most realistic portrayal of romance in video games I've ever seen. And I'm just like, hey, so that happened. We have to still travel together, right? This is gonna be weird. How about we just not make eye contact for the rest of this game? Are we cool? All right, it's great. To finish up on your question, I think it's more the fact that there should be games developed that acknowledge characters that are of that persuasion, more than trying to shoehorn it into projects where it doesn't necessarily belong, but telling it in a proper way, telling it in a way that lets people understand that this is just a lifestyle that people have, and it fits in with the rest of everyone else's lifestyles. Strange thing about that, huh? So I think it's a wonderful thing that it's becoming more and more prevalent in game story writing and culture, and I'm excited to see where people take it in a way where people begin to really kind of get used to the idea that this is life, and these are these people's choices. In some cases, not even a choice. In some cases, it's just how they are. It's wonderful. Next question. Let's go. Oh, so we got time. All right, we'll go here, move through. All right, so we'll go with this gentleman here with the dark shirt. We'll move to Terry Bogart. Then we'll come over to the Ranger. And we'll come over to you guys here after that. So.
Okay, this is leading slightly off the previous question, which is why I'm just figuring. You see a lot in gaming sort of development blogs and stuff about needing to have a protagonist that a player can identify with. And so that's why you get a lot of protagonists that are like heterosexual white dudes, because that's apparently what the media thinks apparently the audience people think spend money. Mm-hmm. As an actor, you are presumably not always playing a character who you think is you. Does that like change your perspective on how you play characters as a player?
I'm trying to really find what your question is in that. Sorry. So you're saying how it does that?
There are some. It seems that some people have problems with playing people who aren't them in some way.
Okay. I see.
Obviously, you as a job, you have to do that.
Yeah. No. I don't think it's a problem. I have a hard time doing it anyway. And a lot of role-playing games where it's kind of like a Mary Sue circumstance, or you put yourself in as the lead character. Like I tried going through Mass Effect as a renegade, and I can't. I'm too good. I'm too goody two shoes. I'm like, you can choose to either save the puppies or burn them. I'm like, save them, fine. Like, I played through a second time to be a renegade and still ended up going Paragon. I'm just not able to do it. So that's my own fault. But, so, I mean, I probably could. I'm sure it'd be fun. I can't. I feel bad. I know they're just digital characters. I know half the people that did the voices of the character, but in my head, like somewhere on some alternate plane, this might actually be a person, and I don't want to do that to them. It's weird. Or Terry, around this loud, and
Hi. You talked a lot about tabletop role playing. Have you ever tried any live action role playing?
I'm trying to make this short. Years ago, a friend of mine who I was in a theatrical show with asked me to come for an evening of Vampire, the Masquerade, that he'd been running for like a whole troupe for a while, and he was like, come check it out. I'm like, I don't really know how it works, but okay. He's like, it's alright, just pick a clan. I'm like, oh, I guess I'll probably go Toreador, that seems more my style. And he's like, alright, cool, just show up in black clothes and you're fine. And apparently it was at like his parents' house, this really nice house up in Simi Valley, and his parents were gone, and I show up, and there's like 40 people here. It's like the entire, like, local LARP group, or whatever, you know, the entire section at this event, and the guy who invited me, I'm pretty sure was trying to hit on me, was the prince. And so he was like holding court over everyone in this game, and I didn't even really know much about my character at all. I was just there kind of watching, and he gets everyone's attention. He's like, I'd like to introduce you to my new protege, Damon. And I'm like, me? And then everyone's eyes went and shifted to me, and they all started walking towards me to want to like wheel and deal. I'm like, I don't even know the back history. I don't know what's going on. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. And it was not a positive experience because it was so much emphasis placed on me, and I was put in a circumstance where I didn't know what was going on or really how to play, that I was just kind of fumbling my way through a social environment that felt really awkward, and so I didn't enjoy that. But it was an interesting experience. I learned a lot of very interesting little quirky things, like, you know, how to obfuscate and disappear. If ever a person bothers you at a goth club in some sort of vampire LARP thing, just do this and they run away because you're turning into a werewolf. You know, little tricks that were kind of fun. I did a few years ago at MagFest, which is like a gaming music convention they have in the US. They invited me out there, and a fan of my web series, W. Brawl, invited me to be part of a Call of Cthulhu LARP they ran one day. And I went, you know what? Fuck it. I'm a big Lovecraft fan, so let's do that. And it was like an artifact auction that was going on. My character was like this ex-German World War I spy character. Yeah. So, you know, the entirety of the day I was playing as this German character. This articles of arcane power I wanted to find. I had like, you know, the long pea coat and the black gloves, and was just like kind of glaring at everyone as this awkward ex-spy. And nothing happened. They auctioned artifacts, and some people bought them, and I bought the one I wanted, and then we all left. And they were like, good game. I'm like, eBay, the LARP, you know, I just didn't. That was so disappointing. So for my birthday this year, I got a weird wild hair, and me and my girlfriend and a few friends got together, and I developed essentially a 1928 Lovecraft murder mystery evening for my birthday. And a friend of mine let me use his house, this like beautiful 3-story house up in Granada Hills in Los Angeles, and I spent way too much money and bought just a bunch of like things off of Amazon, went to a bunch of antique stores, and just basically outfitted this house with like 1920s style decor, and I wrote 26 different characters for everyone I invited with like full 1.5-page backstories and how they all worked into this main character who had been missing for a year, and then gave them characters they already knew that were going to be at the party ahead of time, so they knew some of the previous relationships, and built like all these like 8 arcane relics, and built a ritual room that was like had tendrils of plastic off the tops of the wall, and a fog machine, and an actual ritual table that had like a green light underneath. The runes glowed through, and candles everywhere, and just music playing throughout the house with a giant grandfather clock that went off every hour. It was just stupid. Stupid. And it worked great. Everyone showed up in full costume and character, people that had never done anything like this in their life. And we had a great time. People were arguing and wheeling and dealing. Everyone had like starting cash based on what their character's affluent background was or not. And we had like 2 characters that were like a hobo and a salesman that got together and began making like fake relics and selling them to other players. And it was very much kind of like a lot. It was more. There was no real rule set. There was no health. There was no damage. There was no sanity. It was more like a live action point and click adventure where, like, a lot of rooms in the house had colored locks on them, like a gold lock or a brass lock. You could only go through that door if you had a key, and the key was hidden somewhere. But in order to find this key, you had to go find, in this pot in this room, there was a note that talked about the wine cellar. In the wine cellar, there was one of the bottles that had a letter in it that had a puzzle on it. And upstairs, there was had a puzzle with a bunch of weird lines on it. And upstairs, there was an eyepiece that if you looked through it, there were other lines. And if you looked at the piece, the eyepiece, it formed a phrase. It told you to go through a wall upstairs that was cloth. If you tear through, you went into an upper attic area. Then you had to go across a beam to find a chest that had one of the relics, but also had a section in the backyard that it referred to, that if you went out there and dug up, you'd find another chest that had one of the keys to open one of the doors. It was totally like a full-on point-and-click adventure game. And it all climaxed at midnight with someone dying, and then all of a sudden, like, 3 characters finding out that they were cultists and trying to make the ritual happen to summon the Artheltet and bring them there to take over, and it was crazy. If anyone goes on my Facebook, I have a whole album of sepia-tone images of the evening, and definitely recommend looking at it. It turned out pretty well. So that was technically a war. It's pretty close, I think, so that's my LARPing experience. Next question's over here. I'm sorry doing these pretty quick, so I want to get over here. And probably should have had everyone line up in hindsight, but yeah, I'm sorry.
You mentioned about you trying to kill Thor and stuff like that with the spaceship. I've had that problem in games before where I've run like a Call of Cthulhu game and my players have pretty much said, oh, my character's an ex-soldier, so he has a rocket launcher, so I can go and try and kill Cthulhu. And anyone who knows that wouldn't work. Do you let your players do things like that, or do you sort of just turn around and do what I do, which is kind of asshole-ish, and just go, no, like, Cthulhu is you lose?
It depends. If the player gives me a reason that makes logistic sense to it, if there was like, oh, by the way, my character's an ex-soldier that I never told you before, and it wasn't any of my character's background history, and I have a rocket launcher, I'd be like, no, you don't. You have some, first off, you probably should mention that in your character history. Number 2, that would give you a little bit of combat knowledge, and I think hand-to-hand with Cthulhu is going to end pretty poorly. I have a feeling. I'm a big proponent of letting the players do what they want, but within reason. And when the players get ridiculous like that, that's when I have to deny them, but deny them in a way that's like, come on, buddy, you can do better than that. It's not a full denial. It's more of a, really? Really?
It's like I've had player groups before, like, gearing up because they've decided they're going to go to hell and find, like, whatever demon god they can find, kick his ass because they can go to hell.
And that's cool. And they're all going to die. And the next game, they'll know not to do that. It's a learning experience for everyone.
That way.
There we go. This one gentleman here has his hand up for a while. We'll just pass that down to him real fast, and then we'll move over here, and then we'll go to here, and then we'll start going very good, and then I don't know, we'll figure it out from there.
You mentioned how much you like collaborative role-playing as a means to do collaborative storytelling. Have you played any Fate?
I have not, actually.
I really recommend it. I think it's right up your street. Fate is a role-playing system that's very much based on character traits and story traits that you pick at the beginning, driving plot and driving encounters. So, so for example, you have traits which are aspects, which might be things like, high-minded spook, high-minded spy, something like that. And you could use that in a combat to drive as a player and also as a GM to drive the combat in a certain direction.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That means that it takes the story in a direction that fits the themes of what you're trying to play.
Right, but not in a way that anyone was necessarily planning for, so it's a constantly interesting, evolving storytelling.
Exactly, it's very collaborative. And there's an element to it as well, which is creating the worlds. And if you're into fantasy, you should check out Legends of Angler, which is a fantasy system in using the Fate system, where the players and the GM collaboratively create the entire fantasy world and all of the countries and cities and everything. And it's pretty awesome. Really fantastic. So,
cool, I'll do that. Thank you for the recommendation. Alright, cool. This young lady over here who has had her hand up for way too long, and I apologize for the delay.
Obviously, you're quite comfortable with your status as a geek. Do you have any sort of guilty pleasures that you're a bit embarrassed to like when it comes to your geeky interests?
Tentacle porn. No, guilty pleasures. Ooh. I don't know. I don't really have any shame, so it's hard for me to differentiate what I would keep at bay, per se.
Wearing a dress.
I guess I'd say I enjoy cheesy fantasy films like Fire and Ice or old Conan the Barbarian, stuff of that era. That's just like looking back on it, like, this is so ridiculous, it's so cheesy and so awesome. I loved Hercules. I loved was it Legend of the Seeker? It was a ridiculous show. Oh, it's so
good show.
Oh, it's great, but it's so ridiculous. I love bad fantasy. It's fantastic. I love it so much. That would probably be definitely a guilty pleasure. There are many terrible films, and many terrible things that friends of mine will not endure, and I'll be like, oh, come on! This is great! This is quality shit!
Watch Vile Darkness.
Vile Darkness.
It's the new D&D one.
Oh.
Came out this year.
Really?
Yeah.
Based on the book of Vile Darkness. I saw a trailer for this.
Yeah.
I did.
They spent the budget on the end.
That's what it looks like. Okay. Knowing the book of Vile Darkness, that'll make for an interesting film.
It is.
Alright. Is it good?
Yeah.
That's all I could hope for. I'm gonna go see it. Yeah. Awesome. The next question, Ben.
As a GM, if you could GM for 4 players from any point in history, celebrities, non-real, whoever, who would they be and why?
Like historical characters?
Yeah.
People?
Yeah. If you could have them as players, who would you have?
That's a really interesting question. Wow. Oh, okay. Well, first off, Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman, astrophysicist, love that man, quantum physicist. I'd say Hironobu Sakaguchi's son, the creator and writer of the Final Fantasy series back in the day, back when it was good. I love that man's ideas. Stephen Colbert. That's still a goal of mine, by the way. I'm going to get that guy to table someday. Mark my words. And... I don't know about that. I like when gamers bring snacks to a game. I don't know if I'd be too keen on what he'd be bringing. I'd say, ooh. Alexander the Great? No, he'd be the power gamer. He'd be like, alright, I get to plunge my sword and kill the rest of the players. Like, no! I would probably say Guy Fawkes, because that would be a very interesting rogue character to add to the rest of the campaign. There we go. It's off the top of my head.